Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to begin our program.
Welcome back to the Industrial Transformation event. Once again, here's Mehul Shah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know we had two sets of roundtables, so I'd say it again. Good afternoon, everyone. That's it. Welcome, everyone, to the final round, the final engagement here for day one of the Industrial Transformation Executive event. We've left the best for the last, a panel, an executive panel that's a topic that's near and dear to all of us, the topic of change management. Now, there's a term that we're going to end up using a lot in the next hour, and that term is organizational debt. Now, all of our organizations, some of them have been there for 5 years, 10 years. There are some organizations I know here that have been here for 100 years. Now, if you've been there for that long, you get used to your way of working. And we all saw this morning in all of our roundtables that if we want to drive productivity, if we want to change, we have to change that way of working. Now, how do we change something that's been going on for so long? This roundtable is exactly about that. We have an amazing set of panelists from TreeHouse, from Pfizer, Seeq, ASQ, and LNS Research. That will challenge you. I hope you ask them a lot of difficult questions, because this is a really important topic for us. With that, I invite Jim Wells, LNS Research.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Wells. I'm a senior analyst and research director here at LNS Research. I'm really excited to talk with you today about this concept, organizational debt and the change management imperative. But first, I heard that we've had some great roundtable sessions today. There was a lot of sharing in the two roundtables that I led, and I've heard a lot of great things about the other roundtables. So thank you all for bringing your stories and your perspective and participating in these roundtables. It's often the most valuable, the best part of this LNS event. What I'm here to talk with you guys about is, what is organizational debt exactly, and why should you care about it? I'm gonna answer that second part first. So we heard in Matt's speech this morning, in his keynote, that there are some differences between Pathfinders, Most Improved, and the rest. We see indications of organizational debt across all of our research areas. So 75% of operational excellence initiatives lose momentum, some as early as during the initial training. 80% of chief quality officers focus on compliance over brand reputation. All the while, recalls are on the rise, as you saw from Matt's talk this morning. 74% of manufacturing organizations have no industrial operations strategy. Over 70% of industrial transformations fail. With almost 90% lower workforce experience now than 4 years ago, we're seeing losses in safety performance and quality performance. And industrial productivity, what Matt talked about earlier this morning, has declined nearly 40% between 2004 and 2020. And it's not just those things, but organizational debt costs companies money. So that 35% delta in operating margin that Matt talked about in his keynote this morning translates to $100 million per year less profit for those companies that are not accelerating and turning around their organizational debt and their operating performance. So it's real. Organizational debt is real, and there are elements of organizational debt across people, process, and technology. We have a familiar term. Most of you are probably familiar with the term technical debt, which are those softwares and hardware architectures that were maybe cutting edge, or some decisions that were made 10 years ago that now stand in your way of achieving the seamless user experience and enriched data environment that you seek through industrial transformation. But there are elements in process and people that are organizational debt as well. And so what is organizational debt? It's defined as practices that, in some cases, they grow organically within an organization. Maybe sometimes there's not intentional decisions made. In other cases, they are intentional decisions that are taken in the vision phase of transformation in order to gain speed around those proof of concepts and pilots that are typically done in the vision stage. As I said, there's aspects of organizational debt in people, process, and technology. Some organizational debt can be good. In the vision stage, it helps helps organizations to move faster. But in the value stage, or when you're considering scaling your transformation, some of those changes, some of those practices that are organizational debt in the vision stage have to change in order to make, pardon me, in order to make your transformation able to scale. So some examples are siloed operational excellence. Lighthouse plants are a favorite. So lighthouse plants are attractive for doing proof of concepts because they're more technologically advanced, probably more culturally advanced as well, more hungry for the change. But they are not as representative of your plant network, and therefore scaling from a lighthouse plant is much more difficult. So other aspects of organizational debt, IT-led transformations. We talk about IT-OT convergence and bringing those two organizations together to share priorities. Hierarchical decision-making, disconnected strategies, and multiple versions of the truth. Ironically, lack of change management is an element of organizational debt as well. Thank you. In our research, I get nervous, sorry. In our research, across our research areas, we see 40% of organizations have no strategy or plan or approach for how they're going to manage change. In fact, most of those organizations leave it up to the individual to figure out what the technology is, how it affects their work, and how they can adapt to the new environment. And so we talk about the LNS change management framework in 3 aspects. So most change management frameworks that you may have seen cover the 3 aspects of organizational actions at the top around communicating the why, what, and how of the change, creating pathways to success so the employee can figure out how to navigate the change and come out the other side successfully, and then reinforcing desired behaviors. But there's another side of the coin, which is the individual. So change is a 50-50 proposition, and organizations have their roles and responsibilities to set up the change for success, but the individual has some responsibility to approach the change as well. And speed of adoption is one of those things that's kind of intuitive, but we probably never think about it, right? So you as change leaders have been thinking about the change that you're trying to pitch and push through your organization for far longer than the individual that you've just trained on that change or you've just introduced to that change. And so you've had a lot more mental space and time to consider how that change integrates with the work and the potential value of that change for your organization. Otherwise, you wouldn't be excited about that change, right? But you are well down the line of assimilating that change into your mental model, where the workers that you're talking to about this change are just beginning. They're day one of that. And so we have to allow for that difference between where we're at mentally with the change and our enthusiasm about it and where everybody else is with that change. In addition to that, individuals adapt to change at different speeds, right? So diffusion of innovation theory says there will be a certain normal curve, bell-shaped curve, distribution of early adopters and innovators, and then a certain percentage that are late adopters and laggards. And so individuals, you'll see them, you'll pitch a change and you'll have someone who latches onto it and they're like, yes, I want to do this, and they're going to sprint ahead. And so you as a change leader need to recognize when that happens, because those people are plowing the pathway for you, right? And they are setting the example for others to follow. So recognize those people, celebrate that behavior, paper the walls with it, and then make them mentors, right? Have them be coaches to the others to help them help you come along on the journey. And then the other piece, which is tied to this speed of adaptation, is the individual emotional journey. It's sort of like a grief journey, right? So we're grieving old ways of work and trying to figure out what the new approach is. But it's not a linear path, it's not a straight line, and sometimes there's backsliding and those sorts of things. And those two things are connected. So we as change leaders need to recognize and see those things in the individuals that we're working with. And so when you consider the organizational actions that you're responsible to take, communicate, create pathways to success, and reinforce behavior, don't think about that as a one and done. And once you do the training and communicate it one time, everybody's going to be enthusiastic, and you're confused about why nobody's following you on the path. You have to do those things multiple times, and you have to care and feed those individuals and help them along that journey. And so those actions really light the fire for learning on the part of the individual, and that's what we're trying to do with these organizational actions. We're trying to create intrinsic motivation on the part of the individual to see what their brighter future is by adopting and adapting this change into their work dynamic. We're creating an environment of psychological safety, because learning new things is sometimes messy. And sometimes we fail, and then we have to pick ourselves back up again and try again, and then eventually we learn. And so is it a psychologically safe environment for me to learn and sometimes fail in the pursuit of adapting to that change? And then do I see a clear process that I can follow? Is it a mystery, or is it very clear to me what's the pathway to success that I need to navigate? And so these are the concepts that I want to talk about. I'm very excited to have this panel come up here and join me. So I'd like the panelists to come up here and join me now. Steve Landry, John Kelleher, Lisa Graham, excuse me, Dr. Lisa Graham, and Sid Bhatanager. think so.
Test.
So, Steve, we'll start with you. Give us a little background on TreeHouse and how your experience is relevant to this organizational debt change management topic here today.
So I started my career actually at Procter & Gamble, and that was 40 years ago. So hopefully I don't look that old. And I was very fortunate to actually be the first TPM training manager that P&G had. And then P&G, which most of you probably know, created IWS, in which they wanted to integrate all of their best practices into one manufacturing platform. I happened to be on the steering team that created IWS and then rolled it out in Europe and was very successful in understanding what is IWS and how to implement it. Then I just happened to be the plant manager of Crisco when Smucker acquired Crisco and Jif. So I got to then spend 19 years at Smucker learning how to implement IWS in a non-structured, non-engineering type environment. So I learned a lot about how to actually implement something in a very different environment. And I'm here to share some of my learnings. Just happened that one of my bosses at Smucker moved on to be the CEO at TreeHouse Foods. We make private label food, have 25 plants, the largest private label manufacturer in North America. And so now as the leader of operations and supply chain for TreeHouse, I have been on a journey of implementing TMOS, which, by the way, it's basically IWS. So I'd like to share some of those learnings.
Great. Thanks, Steve. John, same question for you. What's your role at Pfizer, and how is your experience relevant for this topic here today?
Thanks, Jim. My name is John Kelleher. I'm the head of digital quality at Pfizer, and we support PGS as Pharma Global Supply. So all the systems across 40-something plants globally, we support the quality management system, the quality control system, and an EHS system. So we've seen a ton of change. I joined 5 years ago, 6 months before COVID hit, and the change has been a roller coaster. I mean, we went from extreme highs to right now as a correction, and looking at Gen AI as a transformational element into the future. So yeah, it's a big topic for us, and thanks for asking. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks, John. Lisa Graham, you're the CEO of Seeq, and so tell us about your experience and how it's relevant here for this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So by way of background, I'm an engineer, and for those of you who know Seeq, and thank you if you know Seeq, you know we're into the people business. For those of you who don't know Seeq as well, as I hope you will, what I mean by that is we are enterprise SaaS software specifically developed for process manufacturing. And I led with, I'm an engineer, because you might ask me, how did you end up CEO of a software company? And honestly, I do ask myself that on a regular basis when I'm looking at the development process, and how do you assess that if that's not your background? But I joined Seeq in 2018 after partnering with them for 3 years to leverage the software myself for my own analytics consulting business, because there is a very real need that the companies in this room are trying to deliver. We know the drug shortages, we know the quality issues, we know the metals and mining raw materials and the impact that has on adjacent industries. And so the reason I'm here today and what I want to talk about is where there is strength in numbers. I mentioned I'm in the people business. Seeq is in the people business because we are seeing many of you outpacing and getting ahead of these changes that you need to do because you're really leveraging your people. So I want to share a little bit of that today.
Great, thank you. And finally, our association partner, American Society for Quality, Sid Bhatanager, the CEO. What's your perspective on this topic?
Sure, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. So for a little background on myself, I'm an engineer by trade, system engineer, CIO function within the financial services space, and left the financial services sector, have exposure into manufacturing, Harley-Davidson generic power systems. So understand when you talk about people, process, technology, and how you bring it together to drive change, right? So a little bit about ASQ for the individuals that might not know. ASQ is a not-for-profit 501c3. It's the only global not-for-profit consisting of about 40,000 members, 180 organizations across 29 different industries. So it's a very wide breadth and depth of quality knowledge. And I think everybody heard it today. Matthew talked about it a little bit. James, we talked about it in the roundtable. None of this happens without the workforce. Workforce development is where we play, education and community. So when we talk about organizational debt, when we start talking about change management, it is the individuals, the people that really drive that change. There's a great graphic that you had up there, Jim, that really talked about, the early adopters and how do you empower through education, through learning by mistakes to go through that exercise. And I'll talk a little bit more about the community, but that's how we play into the ecosystem.
Great. All right, thank you. So let's get into the questions. So my first question is for you, Steve. Okay. You kind of teed it up in your introduction. When you've implemented this IWS integrated work system that you mentioned, you've done it in successive organizations. So what has been your experience about how you've had to change your approach as you've implemented that more and more times compared to the first time?
So I probably think about this question every single day before I go to work on how I can do a better job. And, when I think back of what I did when I first started at TreeHouse, I did not roll out IWS or TMOS. I listened to the leadership team tell me what problems they have. And I facilitated really good questions. And the leadership team came to the conclusion that they wanted to be world-class. They wanted to set goals. When I said the leadership team, that's all of my direct reports and every single operations director, because we're a manufacturing company and the people that talk to the plant manager every day is your operations leader. We pulled them together, and that commitment of what we're going to do for the next 5 years was their plan, not Steve's plan. And taking that extra month to make sure that we went through that process and development was beneficial. So, the first thing is leadership alignment or ownership at that level. The second thing I would say is down at the floor level, we ask people to do lots of work. Matter of fact, I took a fantastic tour yesterday at a fantastic plant. We have activity boards everywhere. We ask lots of people to do things. Every single picture, you see activity boards. One of the things that I've learned is to make sure that you link all your activities back to a business need. If it's clear on why you're doing the work, it helps drive the improvement activity significantly faster, and you're able to sustain it. The third thing I would say I've done a really good job at is prioritizing the work. When you're doing and you're starting this journey, you've got a quality group or you've got an autonomous maintenance group. I will tell you, pick one thing and do that one thing well. Do not try to go out to multiple areas. Don't implement all key elements. Focus on one thing, do it really well, and make sure that you put an owner of that one thing in place so you can sustain the results. So I know when we're doing this, our implementation at TreeHouse is actually going faster than I led the implementation at P&G or at Smucker.
Great. That's a great story, Steve. Thanks for that. So, John, next question for you. Pfizer, many in the audience may not know, Pfizer's been through a tremendous amount of change with, from pre-COVID times until until your current situation. So can you tell us a little bit about those organizational changes that you've gone through, and what might be that one thing that someone in the audience might be looking for that helps increase speed of adoption from your experience?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it's a complicated, but it seems like it'd be an easy question, right? But it's not. It's actually two things. I'm going to cheat a little bit, right? So the first thing has to be a common purpose, right? You have to have a common purpose. You have to understand why. Everybody has to be behind it. If you don't have that, you really don't have change. But that's a really short answer. So, I'm gonna go a little bit further and talk a little bit about, like, the next really most important thing for us was the culture of change. We went from a pretty stable environment to a massive amount of growth and a really big challenge, right? Supply the COVID vaccine to the world. It's a huge challenge, and we all got behind it. So purpose, check, right? The culture of change was a little bit different, right? We had a lot of people that had a fixed mindset. And that's not a bad thing when you're in a stable environment. You reduce errors, you create efficiency, but now we had to do things we've never done before, right? We had to create an open culture and what we called a growth mindset. And some of those things, and it really is personified by, where we used to say, we can't do that. Now we haven't done it yet, right? And so if you think about that mindset, it had to be changed. We had to break out of the old processes. And the delivery, so we went through a few different things, and we were trained through this, and we were deliberately changing the culture. And the first big thing was the continuous learning. Right, so we had training programs, but we also had rapid experimentation. We had to deliver globally again, but at negative 76 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And we've never done that before, and it was a huge challenge. And we went through many iterations of packaging and dry ice or other different things to get there, and finally, obviously, we did it. We had to have, the mRNA vaccine itself was never produced at any point commercially.
Right.
So we had to learn a brand new vaccine process.
Yep.
So that continuous learning was a big deal. The other piece was really forced open collaboration. I mean, I think inside of a pharmaceutical organization, sometimes there's a magical divide between R&D and manufacturing, and maybe another really big one between manufacturing and sales and marketing.
Right.
But we had to kind of break that down. We were on a team, I was on a team, I should say, that had to get our cycle time down from 76 days, 77 days at the best speed. That was our no deviations, everything works well. 76 days at our best time for, moving any vaccine, not mRNA vaccine, down to 22 days, or we weren't going to hit our goals. It just wasn't going to happen. So we got everybody together with that common purpose. We kind of put all the differences behind. We put all the,
parochialness
politics,
and
all of that down. And not just me, but there's a full team of people that got that down to 22 days. Actually, we got it down to less than 20 days at the end of the day, which was really amazing. So that was all about collaboration, because we didn't really create a lot of new processes. We just did them all in parallel. We did them in a different order.
Right.
The other thing was creating partnerships where we used to maybe do it ourselves. We had to create partnerships really rapidly. I think Corning's in the audience here. We couldn't get enough glass vials in our normal process, so we had to have a really in-depth partnership with Corning. So that partnership, we ran out of dry ice, right? In the country, we had no more dry ice, so we had to buy a company to produce more dry ice, right? Things like that. And then the last but not least is celebrating the small wins, so the incremental things as we got through it. A colleague of mine created an executive dashboard. He's in the audience here, Jonathan. And we watched the batches release every day. So every day as the process was going through, and it was very rewarding. And I think the whole organization could see that and bring it, and it was a continuation of that engagement. So there isn't really one thing, it's maybe multiple things. But I guess if I was gonna say the one big thing is the culture of change. Changing that mindset, getting to that growth mindset is the one thing that we'd wanna do.
Great, wow, that's a terrific story. Lisa, from the software perspective, I talked about lighthouse plants as part of my talk earlier. Can you share an experience where you've seen an end user who's struggling to scale your solution, and what have you seen that has worked in order to change that and increase speed of adoption and overcome those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So whether it's our technology, another piece of technology, you're trying to get your household to align on Tuesday's taco night, okay? If we're trying to change human nature, we're going to fail. So, and I know at least one of you who I met with yesterday was like, we know we shouldn't just go in and expect people to all of a sudden behave different than how humans have behaved for literally thousands of years. Why? Because people want first to be included. So earlier this morning, and forgive me if I don't quite quote this right, Seth, but he mentioned, tell me and I'll forget. And then I think it said, show me and I might remember, but include me and I understand. And what I see works in most cases, if we start with that fundamental idea, do the people who you are trying to get to leverage a new tool, talk to somebody differently, update something differently, do you believe they really understand why? Because unless people don't understand it, or they do understand it, in my mind, is one of the single early indicators of whether you're going to have a change management problem or not. Now, right on the heels of that, though, there's strength in numbers. So where else does something not work? When you try to deploy a single team to try to conquer the entire scale-out plan for your company. There's strength in numbers. By first, they're included, they understand, and then there's everybody in your workforce, and I think it was in the AstraZeneca talk this morning, every small thing matters. So all of a sudden, if you give the right technology into the hands of people who are clear on how they're winning and getting ahead, then I see more success. You leave both of those out on the table, and you've got some data science group running around trying to save the world, or some other role that carries that burden instead of sharing that. The last piece is around crowdsourcing knowledge. How do we actually get the right knowledge in front of people at the right time in a way that isn't like, and I know some of you heard me say this before, you walk up to the library and there's this little tiny door slit and you put in a thing that says, I need these 6 pieces of processed data and this batch recipe, and I need to know if, so-and-so was working, and someone slides the information out onto you in paper or in Excel, right? And you take 10 seconds and you're like, ooh, I should have asked for something else, or I should have asked for something else, or I don't even know what I need, don't even know that's here that could help me. So if we have a chance to talk about Gen AI a little bit, I'd love to bring in how we see that technology component bringing this last piece in, which is people want to look smarter and be seen that they look smarter, be smarter, go further. So you appeal to them feeling included, like they understand. Mm-hmm. You talk with them so that they understand that what they're doing is moving the needle, however small. And then finally, you give them access to stuff where they can ask really, in their mind, maybe dumb questions safely and with curiosity, and then show up really smart. Where I see companies intentionally checking their assumptions on whether they're doing those things, they roll out really fast. Those that don't kind of keep wondering why the technology isn't working. So, thanks, Jim.
Great, that's a great answer. Thank you. Sid, so your membership are the future leaders of quality organizations, across these companies and many others. So I wonder what your unique perspective might be on the needs of the younger generations that you're seeing in ASQ membership that maybe weren't present in my generation.
Yeah, it's another one of those easy, hard questions.
Right.
Right. So, and a lot of the great panelists touched on it. Right. So we have I think it was brought up earlier today, we have a multi-generational, across the globe workforce, right? Whether it be remote or in person. What we're seeing is education, empowerment, engagement, some of the things that you just talked about, and the need for community, right? Nobody wants to fail, right? Or have a perception of failing. So what we're seeing is our community is really bringing those next gens in, trying to give them the nuggets of gold that we're all here for today, right? This is a community coming together to share those thought leaderships. So from a multi-generational perspective, we're seeing engagement look very different. How individuals used to learn, here's a book, go flip through it. Adult learning theory coming into place, where we're seeing, some people just want to be left alone and just give me a module and I'll learn. Some people want to be in person, and some people want to engage at this capacity. So it is a complicated ecosystem, to say the least, but everybody in this room is a leader in their own organization. And I think engagement, at least like you talked about, right, becomes a key component of understanding your workforce. How do they learn? And it is not something that's just going to be a turnkey that you'll be able to flip a switch. And from an education training perspective, we're starting to see organizations come to us and say, hey, ASQ, we need 30 of lean training. We need 30 of root cause analysis, but we need it in a different modality because our audience that's just coming out of university were working in COVID and you like working with their pajamas, right? It's not for us to judge that as much to meet them where they are. And a community is a big portion of what we do in that space. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So John, I'm going to go to you next for the question. So Lisa mentioned AI in her answer, and I know that in the Pfizer organization you have a big vision for AI. So what's your perspective on how to make AI something that the worker can be excited about instead of something that they fear?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you just said at the end there. It's the trust in the technology and the results and the value you're going to get out of it is the key. Right? Trust isn't earned. I mean, trust is earned, excuse me. Trust isn't given, it's earned, right? So we have to get the right trust dynamics and move them from your early adopters all the way back to the laggers. And we need to make sure that they all know, what that is. And first thing you got to do is set expectations. Gen AI does some amazing things, and it does some amazing things not so well as well. So it does text generation amazingly. It does summarization great, translation, contextual search. So if we can set that context, it's a huge win. Then we have to create the credibility, right? Credibility in the tools, credibility in the people that are pushing them through. If it's just going to it can't just come from digital. It has to come from a champion. Yep. We have to find the champions, those early adopters, and you probably know who they are in your organization. They're the guys that are asking for the changes all the time. They're knocking on your door. And they want to move forward. And those you have to tap into that group and create a credibility behind the rapid experimentation and the pilots that we're doing at the moment, and hopefully one sticks. We're at a point where a few of them are sticking now, and which is great. And now we have to figure out how to scale that to the 9,000 people in my use case, which is almost the biggest challenge as it is to create the technology and get the results back. But to do that, I think we have to show value immediately. And it has to be better than a human would do it. We were talking about root cause analysis in a previous one. And even though we showed a pilot that was slightly better than the human population could do it, it wasn't good enough. We had to go a little bit better. We had to do a lot better before that they're going to accept it.
Right.
So we have to actually overshoot the standards that a human population could do a piece of work. And then we have to create a reliable and safe kind of structure around it. The discussion around augmented versus automation, I think we have to really dive into and make sure people understand that you're augmenting, not automating. We're not making it autonomous at this point. It's an augmented approach at the moment. So, and then where do we apply it? It has to be applied at the right risk. With the right risk, it has to have the appropriate risk profile to apply a technology that's going to automatically generate a result. And that's another huge element of this. So if we create the right trust dynamics and we actually keep on talking about the value and we build credibility, you're going to get this off the ground. It's going to go through that curve. Just like we saw analytics, 6 or 7 years ago, that was the same. It's going to be a similar curve that you see there. When we started an analytics program 6 years ago, everybody was scared about getting the data and getting it out. I think we're going to see, and we're going to have to tackle that. It's not going to be overnight, even though the executives want it overnight, right? But I think that's kind of long story to your short question.
No, that's great. So you heard it here. John said it's not Skynet. Those of you who know what Skynet is from the Terminator. Lisa, you have something to add there?
I do. I love that you just said it's not Skynet. Here's the thing. I wish we'd never called it artificial intelligence. Okay, yes, thank you. Why we did that to ourselves, I don't know, especially if we turn around in a fairly conservative industry and try to push it as the thing that's supposed to save all jobs. And we know what we all grew up with watching movies. I mean, for crying out loud, right? And what Gen AI is today is not artificial intelligence that's making autonomous decisions. It is a smart way for someone in my library analogy to quickly tell you, here's everything you might want to look at around compressors. And here's the things your colleagues might be using. And here's the knowledge portal. I don't have to guess or wonder, but if we just step back for a minute and talk about it without an acronym, and we say, wouldn't it be great if this served up for you a whole bunch of materials? No one actually has to know how much of it you've been given to know how much you've ignored, right? But you can actually sift through it and get smarter and have curiosity. And it has nothing to do with replacing the person to make decisions. So I think back to when we talk about it, I like that you added ML right after it, right? It's this learning component. So I just wanted to add that as we talk about change management, I believe we can do a good job together of socializing a common definition that reassures everywhere. Why would we take each company in the room and you have to go battle it out one shift at a time to reiterate that this is not replacing their ability to make decisions? Right. This group of people can actually step back and say, if we all said the same thing here in every post, in every meeting, in every, right, then we can change the mindset more quickly together. So
that's great.
Thanks, Jim.
Sid, I think you want to jump in on that.
Just go back to John's point that he mentioned. One of the key components of what you just said, John, is credibility. Right, I think when we start talking about machine learning, automation, I won't use AI, but AI in this context, it does become really important, going back to my previous comment of education of our workforce to say what is acceptable within your organization as it comes to credibility. Because the last thing I think John or anybody on this panel wants is somebody delivering something to them 2 days in advance, right, but not going through the rigor of making sure it's coming from the right source and has been validated.
Yep, great. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Steve, this is your question. So, not just for the younger generations, but really older generations want this too. Being empowered with decision-making ability and the ability to improve your own work is a huge motivator. But it's not you can't just delegate decision-making power and then just wish them luck, right? So what has to go along with that delegation of decision-making power in order for you to achieve what you as a leader want, which is everybody making the decisions the way you would make them?
So I think this conference has actually answered this question really well. If we look at the data, if you look at the model, matter of fact, your change management model talked about how to manage through the change really, really well. And it's all about caring about the individual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our company purpose is gauge and delight one customer at a time. And every single person that works in operation believes our number one customer is the hourly person. So every single thing we do in operational excellence is teaching our operators to become technicians. That's part of our journey. And the model that you actually showed is the acceptance model of, as you're teaching people how to clean their equipment, how to do, I heard people talk about center lines, I heard people about doing vibration analysis, I've heard lots of ways that we have educated our people to learn, because when nobody wants to check their brain at the door. When they come into work, you want to make a difference every single day. And as you as a leader, the more you enable people to make a difference every day, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be excited, you're going to run better, and you're going to meet that business need that I talked about. And so that's the key, is it engaging our people.
Can I jump in?
Oh, of course, please.
I love that, in particular because part of what we then help them with is how to communicate what they base their decisions on. And that'll harken back to how we leverage some of the new technologies that are out there. We want them first to make a decision. We want them to be able to explain that decision. And we really want to make sure the decision was right when they change a process temperature or lever or something that could have really interesting consequences. So I just think it's a real important point you made.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the panel, and so now we're gonna throw it out to the audience for any questions that you might have. So this is being live streamed. So if you have a question, there are folks with mics in the audience that'll come to you, and you can ask your question into the microphone. So the live stream people hear your question. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. Great panel. How do you consider speed when you're thinking about change management and overcoming organizational debt?
Anybody want to tackle that one?
I will.
Yeah, please.
In some respects, it's the initial speed of getting credibility that this is something that you'll get bigger or broader buy-in. So moving fast around, say, a lighthouse is a good idea. Having vetted, make sure the technology has scale already, that what you're really going to then have is a change management challenge after that. Moving quickly there is important. Anyone else want to add?
So we really look at making sure that you have a plan and you stay on your plan and learn from your mistakes. So, you know, the second slide that we showed that talks about safe, I actually like the word security a little bit better than safety, because I teach safety, quality, then efficiency. But making sure that you're sticking to the plan, that's what the speed should be, right? So that's, when you ask the question, that's immediately what popped to my mind.
And I think just adding to that, understanding the organization culture, right? I think with speed, you might have errors, you might have some concerns, and understanding the leadership and the culture that allow you to fail, right? Because with speed, you might stumble a little, but if they understand that you stumble once, but the next time you'll get it, I think that becomes a key factor to success.
Great. Thank you for that question. I think there's another one over here.
Yeah, there's one more, Jim. Thanks, it's Matt.
Oh, hi,
this
Matt.
Is for Steve, but the rest of the panel, too. One of the questions I've heard a lot from folks in my discussions is how do I change the minds of those who might be at the top, folks that might be a COO, right, that might not be embracing change or transformation. So I'd love to hear from Steve and others examples of maybe when you change your perspective or how folks on your team helped shape your decision making, what that journey looked like.
So I got to be brutally honest. My number one opportunity is I go too fast. And in self-reflection, my personal coach has helped me always ask 3 questions before I react. And so I know that I have learned to ask questions of my leaders before I react and move forward. So the art of the question has been really important for me personally in the journey of how do I draw out of people. Don't ask how you're doing. Ask, what is it today that you made a difference for somebody out on the floor? That's going to draw a whole lot more conversation about buy-in and breaking down barriers of how to adopt change. And I personally have gone through this journey of doing it wrong as many times as right and helping my leaders create the plan. And my job is to ask the question. So that's literally what I do all the time. And I've created a culture that if you're not asking a question, you're not pushing hard enough or going fast enough, and you're not learning. Because if you're not going through the change management model, you don't know how to do everything yourself, and you're not asking a question, you're not changing. So those are some of the things. So it's all about questions.
So one on my side, Matt, and I think you alluded to it before, questions is a great way. One tactical thing that I particularly do from my perspective, I have a board of directors, and then I have my leadership team. It's a concept of 1-3-1. When I really sit down with them, we work on the problem statement, which is the 1. Then they kind of walk away. They come back with 3 solutions and 1 recommendation. And the only thing I'll say to that is also understanding who are you providing the solution to and what do they care about. Matt, you mentioned it this morning. CFOs might just care about the numbers, right? Where in our mission-driven work, I have a fantastic board of directors that care about the mission. So really driving to what it is that the person cares about or the management team cares about is the approach that I normally take.
Great. Thank you. I think there's a question over here.
Great. Thank you so much. Great panel and certainly an important topic. My question is, in your experience, when you're going through a change management initiative, is that best led by your internal leadership team or by a third-party consultant or service provider, or C, some combination of the 2?
Any perspective there?
D, all of the above.
D, all of the above?
No, for our perspective, it has to start from the top.
Yep.
Right, it really has to have that executive support to be able to be successful. But I think we shouldn't oversee the importance of an external voice to revalidate your opinion.
Sure. If I can add before you jump in there. So the perspective we've seen in a couple of our research cycles around this is that, to the extent that you have outside organizations that help and participate, it makes it harder to internalize the change and makes it harder for it to feel owned by the company. So there might be a model where it starts with external consultants to gain momentum, but has to be quickly internalized in order to make it the company's own initiative. So, Steve,
So Sid, when Sid talks about it has to come from the top, I get back to point number 2 again. What is your business need that you're trying to change? And if leadership's not aligned to embracing that change, it's probably not going to happen, right? So they have to be aligned of that change because they're going to derail it at some point in time. So sometimes we have hired external people to kind of wake you up and say what you're doing is not good enough. And, that's where an outside group like LNS or some other organization can tell you, benchmarking, you think you're good, but you're not. right? And so that sometimes is very, very positive. But I agree with Sid, the top leadership team has to be bought into whatever change you're trying to drive.
Just adding from the services partner perspective, in our experience, my personal experience, the number one thing you can do well is pick your internal champion to lead very carefully, and then your service provider, your partner, should be at their disposal, providing them with almost good advice, coaching, benefit of their experience, but the service piece should be showing up, reinforcing the leadership of your internal champion, with it clear that they're exiting themselves from the equation as the critical mass takes, route in there. So, in some respects, there's service providers that make their money doing very long-term service projects. That's great, but you make sure up front whether this is or isn't under that category. And then quite often, I think your software technology partners who are not service organizations are more than happy to slowly get out of the way once we've had a chance to coach and reinforce and maybe bring some connectivity to other champions at other companies so they can share best practices. So to me, it's top down for sure, coupled with an initiative that someone's excited about, that shows up in newsletters, right? So the people, again, feel like they're working on something that matters and they understand it. And at the end of the day, trying to go it completely alone, I think is a hard thing to do.
Yep. Great.
The only thing I would just add there is, and I agree with everybody here, is that the purpose has to be owned by the company that's making the change. And, you can't get engagement unless you do that as a colleague, as part of the company. You can have an external party help you coach, do activities, create communications, but the purpose has to be owned.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Agree with all that. Any other questions in the audience? Okay. Oh, is there another one? Jason? No? Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to thank the panel for participating and for your time, and thanks a lot. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you so much. Can we give the panel a huge round of applause? All right, we are at the end of day one. Couple of quick reminders. Everybody should have their dinner invitations. Either they are on your calendar. If you've downloaded the app, they're on your app. If you don't have it, please see one of LNS research team members. We have 3 separate dinners to make sure that you have small groups of engagement among the broader audience. So please make sure you're invited to one of the dinners so that you can continue the engagement that you had throughout the day to the dinners. One last thing, we are completely digital. Every section that you attend has a survey. Please take 30 seconds. It's literally 3 questions. I'm sure all of us put surveys out to our manufacturing plants. It's really, really important for us to get that feedback. If you take 30 seconds, give us the feedback on the content, on the speakers, on the format of the event. Really helpful for us to do better events and provide you better quality content. With that, I would end day one. We start 7:30 tomorrow morning right here, and the sessions start at 8:30 in the morning. Thank you, everyone.
Join us here again tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. for day 2 as the Industrial Transformation event continues.